Why are you whites in my country? You did not ask the whites to come here. The Great Spirits gave us these hills as a home. You say, why do not we become civilized? We do not want your civilization.
You've spoken red truth.
Tell me then, white truth, long hair.
In the first place, the Great Spirit did not give you these hills. You took this land by force. You took it from the Cheyenne, the Shoshone, and the Arapaho. You took it with lance and tomahawk. But now the white man makes war on you. What's the difference?
The whites have no honor. A white man walks death, comes out of season.
That's a thing called progress.
It's a thing called greed. Tell me this. Am I evil because my skin is red? Is it a wicked thing that I was born when my father was born? Is it a bad thing that I would die for my people?
It's still red truth and not real truth.
Tell me this true truth, then.
Give Red John the word. Tell the little rooster he's extinct.
One. When Sitting Bull was a boy, the Sioux could throw 10,000 warriors into battle. Today it's the white man's turn. Those that you have seen on these hills and on the plains are like a handful of bees. There are many. They are more than the blades of spring grass, more than the buffalo when they smother the earth in their great herds. There's no way to stand against the white man. Their weapons are terrible. They have the power. You will bend to the long knives or be broken. You will live as they say or die on their bayonets.
That was straight tongue, Captain.
If such is the true truth, then I will sing my death song.
There are over 550 million firearms in worldwide circulation. That's one firearm for every 12 people on the planet. The only question is, how do we arm the other 11? You know who's going to inherit the earth? Arms dealers. Because everyone else is too busy killing each other. That's the secret to survival. Never go to war. Especially with yourself.
I tell you, young boy don't know nothing. Get this lather up here. Yeah. Put that towel on your feet. Get your phone nice and elaborate. Y'all come on around here and learn something. Peter, you finish that up. Put that on there, Ricky. Put that on the side over there. See, in my day, a barber was more than just somebody to sit around in a FUBU shirt with a draw hanging all out. In my day, a barber was a counselor, he was a fashion expert, he was a style coach, pimp, just general all-around hustler. But the problem with y'all cats today is that you got no skill. No sense of history. And then, with a straight face, got the nerve to want to be somebody. Want somebody to respect you. But it take respect to get respect. Understand? See, I'm old. But Lord willing, I'd be spared the sight of seeing everything that we had worked it for flushed down the drain by someone who don't know no better.
What's up? What's up? What's up, huh? Huh? You gonna bring some sense to me, motherfucker? Huh? Huh? Come on with it. You come on with it. You cool, but you got no groove. Man, you stuck in the 60s, boy. Oh, you think you gonna change me? Huh? You think you gonna change me? Fuck you and this bitch. Y'all don't know Fat Money, boy. Pokey pig ass. Call a bitch again, and I'm gonna get to know you, Nino. You better save your strength, Paul. What you looking at?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm 23 years old and you got me feeling like a very old woman. I don't understand you at all.
And you never will. Ho.
Stop! Stop, please! Stop! Stop!
Bring your fucking ass up.
Stop, please!
That's all you got, boy? That shit was faggoty, boy.
Doesn't anything matter to you?
Oh, yeah. Get paid. You got anything better to offer me? Huh? Y'all motherfuckers is corny, I'm telling you. Corny. So wake me up when y'all get ready to let me out here, all right? I'm asleep now.
Excuse me, you don't have children, you have kids, you have baby goats, you little black fucking Uncle Tom, Aunt Jemima motherfucking BET, wig-wearing, cocksucking motherfucking Negroes! Stay the fuck away!
Guy right here is forcibly trying to lock somebody up for breaking up a fight.
Everybody standing here, they told you I didn't do nothing. I did not sell nothing. Because every time you see me, you want to harass me, you want to stop me, try to tell a cigarette. I'm minding my business, officer. I'm minding my business. Please just leave me alone. I told you the last time, please just leave me alone. Hold on. Don't touch me, please. You gotta touch me. Damn, man.
All right, stop. Put your hands, buddy.
Put your hand behind your back. I can't breathe.
All he did was break up a fight. And this is what happens for breaking up a fight. This shit is crazy.
People in America did not accept whiteness as a natural category right away. People used the category in fairly desperate ways for a long time. It took a while for people to become habituated to the ideals of race and whiteness to the point that they took them as natural features of human biology. While whiteness was a legal designation that required concerted acts of propagation in order for it to take hold in the early colonial period, by the end of the 18th century, people in America take its reality for granted to the point that it could be used to make significant decisions about citizenship and democratic government. So where the colonial era witnessed the forging of whiteness as a racial category, the post-revolutionary era saw its deployment in the creation of the Union. It therefore evolved from a social distinction of dubious value for the mass of poor European laborers to a natural way of dividing humanity, to a necessary condition for citizenship in the early republic. In the history of whiteness, they argue that in 1790 was a watershed year for the development of whiteness because that was the year in which the first Congress passed a unique immigration law that gave an unprecedented significance to being white. It states in part that all free white persons who have or shall migrate into the United States and shall give satisfactory proof before a magistrate by oath that they intend to reside therein, and shall take an oath of allegiance, and shall have resided in the United States for 1 whole year, shall be entitled to the rights of citizenship. This simple law wove tightly into the tapestry of our civic life the ideal of whiteness as a superlative and privileged racial group. In one stroke, this law consecrated a racial hierarchy that had never been as sharply defined. It extended full citizenship to the poorest immigrants from Europe, while casting people of Asian, African, and indigenous descents into a legal limbo where they were unable to represent their interests, regardless of how long their family have lived in America. This increase in the political significance of whiteness in the early republic had to do with the connection between whiteness and the ideal of fitness for self-government. That is, citizenship was reserved for free white persons because they were the only people deemed civilized enough for self-government. Jacobson illustrated the degree to which the very ideal of republicanism was determined by the idea of whiteness. Fitness for self-government, a racial attribute whose outer properties was whiteness, became encoded in a naturalization law that allowed Europeans unrestricted immigration and their unhindered male civic participation. It is solely because of their race, in other words, that they were permitted interest. In the early Republican era, whiteness became a normative category that, when conjoined with maleness, was equivalent to normative citizenship. Whiteness was just as much about who participated in the new nation as it was about who couldn't because they were not fit for self-government. People of African, Native American, Latino, and Asian descent. However, this simple ideal of whiteness came under scrutiny in the 19th century because of two interrelated events. The massive influx of Irish immigrants to the United States starting in the 1840s and the New York City draft riots of 1863. These two events forced Yankees of young republic to redefine the ideal of whiteness in order to separate themselves from the mass of European immigrants who were granted entrance into the country as white folks, but were nevertheless distinct from the Anglo-Saxon stock seen as the lifeblood of the United States. As immigration, war, and expansion changed the demographics of the Republic, through laws, sermons, debates, and literature, changed the meaning of whiteness. The mid-19th century witnessed a dramatic increase in European immigration to the United States. While fewer than 9,000 immigrants came to the United States in the year of 1820, nearly 250,000, which is 234,968 immigrants, made their way to the shores in 1847. Black 47, as this year is still known in Ireland, was a pivotal time in the history of whiteness in the United States because it was the first year of the Great Famine, which in 5 years, time claimed 1 million lives and forced as many to leave Ireland, ultimately cutting Ireland's population by 1/4. Most who fled this calamity came to America. Jacobson points out that by the 1860s, the foreign-born population of the United States was more than 4 million, of whom 1,611,304 had been born in Ireland. As Europeans, these Irish immigrants were legally counted as white and were thus allowed entry according to the Immigration Act of 1790. However, since these Irish did not fit the American ideal of a group of people fit for self-government, native-born whites developed an explanation that could account for a group of people who were biologically white, yet still suspect as potential citizens. While America received waves of immigrants from all over the world in the 19th century, the Catholic Irish were in very real sense the immigrants of the 1840s and the 1850s, while many other immigrant groups attract little attention and blended easily with American social norms. The Irish were unable to assimilate. Though most Irish women and men spoke English, They did and so in their own particular vernacular that was laden with the characteristic brogue. Their industrial folk custom from songs of funerals appeared backward to most native-born Americans. As William Williams says in his History of Irish American Music and Culture, without the wall of language to hide behind, the peculiarities and archaism of the Irish folk tradition were very evident for Yankee bemusement and concern. Further, their Roman Catholicism drew the suspicion and ire of native-born Protestants who thought that the Catholics were in America to overthrow the democracy on order from the pontiff in Rome. This threat weighed so heavily on the minds of some American Protestants that myriad political parties emerged, the most famous of which was the Know Nothing Party, that were dedicated solely to combating the perceived threat that Catholic immigrants posed to Anglo-Saxon America. Thus, their language, custom, clannish behavior, and above all, Catholicism was distorted to form the image of Paddy that all Irish men and women would have to confront. Since they stood out so, the Irish received a kind of a discriminatory and particular attention that was analogous to that experienced by indigenous and African people during the colonial period. The arrival of immigrants from the island, Germany, Italy, and other parts of Europe shift the focus of racial discourse from the issue of white versus non-white to issues regarding the nature of whiteness itself. Jacob argues, whereas the salient features of whiteness before the 1840s had been in the powerful political and cultural contrast to non-whiteness, now its internal divisions too took on a new and pressing significance. Navitists were particularly concerned with the inability of these newly arrived immigrants to live up to this previous assumption that the white race was uniformly fit for self-government. Furthermore, as there were such wide differences in behavior, experience, and appearance between the Navitus white and the newly arrived immigrants, most of whom had never identified themselves white before they had arrived in the United States, there needed to be an explanation to account for the difference between the immigrants and the native whites. The result was just another change in the definition of whiteness. It was now explained as a vast family of white races that could be hierarchically ranked in terms of their innate ability to participate in a republic. Thus, the Paddy and the Yankee were not seen as equally white, where the latter could partake of all the advantages of being a white citizen of the republic. Prior was the probationary white person who had to overcome certain biological and cultural defects that impede his ability to be a white American citizen. Comte Dungoban work in Inequality of Human Races in 1855 defined the new racial logic of the time. His work was a caveat to the Anglo-Saxon race that were in danger of devolving by mixing with the most degenerate races of olden-day Europe. They are the human flotsams of all ages, Irish, crossbred Germans, and French, and Italians of even more doubtful stock. While Dungoban himself believed that this racial degeneration was inevitable, his American readers took it upon themselves to prevent this from happening by taking measures against mixing among the white races. The first step, erecting a bulwark between the superior Anglo-Saxons and the degenerate Irish, Italians, Russians, and Germans, was to identify the traits of these groups that they might be avoided and isolated. The Irish, more than any group of Europeans, became the object of these new racial investigations. Jacob points out, while popular literature of the time discussed the particular traits of Russians, Italians, and Germans, by far more powerful language of racial differentiation applied to the Irish. Negative assessment of Irishmen of Celticism as a fixed set of inherited traits thus became linked at mid-century to a fixed set of observable physical characteristics, such as skin and hair, color, facial type, and physique. The Irishman was lowbrow, brutish, and even simian in popular discourse. A Harper Weekly piece in 1851 described the Celtic physiognomy as distinctly marked by, among other things, the small and somewhat upturned nose and black tint of skin. We can see this new logic of ranked white races, when we see the frequency with which the Irish was equated to African Americans. This is seen most strikingly in the popular epithets that related the group to each other. The Irish were frequently referred to as niggers turned inside out. The blacks were called smoked fish or smoked Irish. The two groups share similar depictions in the media: lazy, happy-go-lucky, stupid, childlike, and charming, incompetent. The final and most insidious commonality between the two had to do with the fact that the hardship that both endured, the man-made famine and attempted genocide from which the Irish fled, and the uniquely horrific Middle Passage and slavery suffered by African Americans, were either trivialized, ignored, or treated as exotic within white-owned and Hey, how's y'all doing? This is Mr. Blows Your Minds coming with another thought-provoking topic. And today's topic, we'll get right into it, y'all. I'm not even going to hesitate with this because this is real serious business. The name of this video is going to be called The Lawly White Civilized Savage. That's right. The Lawly White Civilized Savage. And the reason why I'm bringing this is because based on simple fact about Eric Gardner and what had happened to that brother, based on the scenario that took place that ended that man's life, and a lot of them who will hear this video will be saying, well, okay, we can understand that you addressed in this particular situation based on the fact that what had took place, but how come you don't talk about the black on black crime? Well, anytime a family fight with family, that's a family affair. You know what I'm saying? When you fight with your family, that's internal. When anything outside, externally, we're going to defend that. So there's no justification in either side, but one is internal, it's family. The other one is when the situation I'm looking at it from, what I'm noticing that a lot of people who use their professional careers to hide behind their true heart and feeling towards their racial tension on other people. And so when I look at the people who have this authority, who have been given this authority to take the life of an individual based on their job, think about that. Punching a damn clock. And then in those 8 hours that you're doing the job, well, in the case of, police officer, you have a 12-hour shift, and in the hours of when you punch in to the time you punch out, you're liable to take somebody's life, maybe more than one. Now, I'm not justifying criminality. I'm not saying that people who do crime are justified under any ethnic or racial. You understand what I'm saying? Well, there's times when a situation is happening, and when, as an individual, as people, especially when you're talking about people who are grown, how is it that a man has died based on the simple fact that, let's say his hustle was to sell cigarettes, right? Let's just say he was hustling, selling cigarettes, right? Loose ends, right? Or loosies as we call it, right? And let's put yourself in this predicament. You who are listening to me are the authority or working for the establishment. Yes, you may have accosted this individual before. And yes, to some degree, based in the law, this might be breaking the law according to your discretion. Okay, was this not a discretionary scene, right? Was this discretionary? Haven't there been times when some of you and myself have been pulled over by police officers, and you may have been going faster than the speed limit, and the police officer, based on his discretionary, right, his discretion, he can evaluate whether he wants to pursue further or give you a break, right? Now let's just say, based on what we've seen in the footage, that he had been, given this break several times. But let's look at the severity of the crime here. You understand what I'm saying? Let's really look at the severity of the crime. So an individual who goes into the store and buys a pack of cigarettes. When you purchase the pack of cigarettes, do you not pay the taxes equivalent to the pack of cigarettes you just purchased? Whether it be 1 pack, 5 packs, or a carton. So how is it that you as the individual decide that, okay, I'm going to hang out tonight, I'm going to be at a place that there's going to be a lot of people, and they're going to be drinking and partying and so forth, and I'm going to bring me a whole bunch of squares with me. Instead of me giving squares away, I decide that if somebody asks me for a square, I give you one for a quarter, right? So that be your hustle. Your hustle is in a pack of, how many it comes in a pack of cigarettes, times 25, you got your money and you made a little profit off of it, right? Now, is this law generally for the individual people? Was this law made for the customer, or was it made for the establishment as the store? See, because Lucy's didn't start becoming known unless you were coming out of the hoods. It was in the hoods where you go to the little bodegas, the little corner store, the little candy store, the Arab store. It was his invention to break the pack and start selling squares to the blacks individually, quarter, 50 cents each. Now, as a store, that is your business, is to sell, but you had an obligation for everything that you sell. There is tax involved in it. So we can see this law being strictly to be adhered by those who have the establishments to sell goods. You as a customer, once you pay for your cigarette, you have already paid the tax on it. So why is the police constantly harassing people about loose cigarettes? You mean for everything that must be sold, bought and purchased, that you are entitled to a tax on it, even though the taxes have already been paid? Is this extortion? Is this what we consider to be extortion? That you can just, for everything, regardless of the fact that I already paid the taxes on it, but you're going to double tax me, triple tax me, quadruple tax me. You feel what I'm saying? And so why is it that the officer is paying so much attention based on all the criminality that is going on with, look at the criminality that's going on in this country. And to be focused on the individual that you see is not a teenager, not a young man, but he's an older man. Matter of fact, he was 43 years old. And as a 43-year-old man versus, I'm not sure what the age of the individual who choked him, but I'm pretty sure he may not have been 43. But where was it the professionalism to be able to have a meeting of the mind conversation that we can work this out? Okay? Because initially it looked like that it was about, according to the cameraman, that he was breaking up a fight prior to this incident. And so based on him being there and the president, the officer who had seen him before, he's, I guess, assuming, we don't know the whole entire story, we only can go on what we see here, that he went on the premise that he was selling Lucy's, and there was a reason for him being there. And I'm not mistaken, I think that was a store right there. Yet there was no cigarettes there in his hands or any of that. There was nothing mentioned about it. They didn't show anything. So to accost this man, and the man was, irritated for the simple fact that if you harassed by the police officers or officers on a daily basis, there's a time when you just get to fed up. Robin Harris used to say, festivity. When you get to that point of festivity, there's only so much you're going to take. And so it looks to me that somebody had a premeditated idea, not as into what ended up eventually happened, but I'm going to apprehend you because I have the power in my job to do so. See, a lot of people don't realize, and that's what I'm going to show you based on the history about what I just read, is that according to what had been stated there in that history that I just read to you, when they began creating this nation, and when it became that there was a division being made in this land, and for you people who believe that when they tell you that America was a melting pot, it wasn't a melting pot in the ideology that you think, that it was about mixing everybody. They were talking about white folks. I'm going to say that again. When they was talking about America melting pot, they were not talking about you African, you Asian, you Latino, you others. You feel what I'm saying? They were talking about the culmination of bringing back the ancestry of those whites who have migrated from Europe, who had all migrated to other different geographical locations, that will end up coming to this country, and they end up somehow making a status so there would be some way to differentiate between the different groups of a status and rank. And when they got done at the bottom, those that were at the bottom were considered to be no different than what the African, the Asian, the Latino was. So based on the history that I had just read to you and told you that they were, when they came up in this colonial area, this was the beginning of witnessing of the forging of whiteness. This is when they were going to start to forge in this ideology of whiteness, because they wanted to make a distinction between each other based on not just skin color, but this ideology of this so-called biology that is really nonsense when you really break it down. I'll say that again. In this colonial area period, this was the beginning of the forging of this whiteness through this ideology, through biology, which is really nonsense when you realize who they all are and where they all, their root systemic is from. Now, it was now after the fact of the Revolutionary War, okay, when they had the North versus the South, that you now start to deploy the creation of the Union. Well, the reason why that happened is because now you got 1863 happening. Now you have the mindset is being set that they're going to let go of the slaves, emancipate the slaves, and the slaves, and you think about it in a reality, from a reality perspective, they were the ones who had all the skills. Think about it. They were the ones who was agriculture, they were the farmers, they were the ones who were the masons and everything else. I'm not saying that white people weren't there and that they weren't participants of it, but the majority of the people that were in the South at this particular time, and I don't really go with the prescription of them talking about there was slaves only in the South. That's a damn lie. But we're going to just use that as our reference because we're talking about the revolutionary aspect of it. I will move north and show you. But what I'm saying to you is that what happened was once 1863 came about, the so-called servitude whites were looking at the fact that, well, there's so many of them, and they're all skilled, and they're going to take all the jobs. And then, matter of fact, white people who listening to me, you know this shit is true. If you don't make more than black people, you don't consider yourself to be white. You figure you a nigger. I'm going to say that again. You white folks who listening to this, you know that if you made the same amount of money as a person of color, African American, Latino, Asian, you will consider yourself not even to be white. You will consider to be a nigger. And so what they wanted to do was unionize so that could give them some kind of privilege based on this new distinction that they were going to create. And so with this new distinction, it gave the poor European laborers a natural way of dividing humanity into a necessary condition for citizenship in this new republic. See, the poor whites can now get a certain status based on their skin color, of portraying of the appearance of being white. Now, so after they established this, you got 1840 coming. Now, I know I jumped to 1863, but 1840 came before 1863. But I'm just telling you, 1863 is why they was getting the Union together. But the problem was the influx of immigrants from Europe were coming in between 1840 through, I think, like 1863. I think that's what a big influx. So about 23 years of this migrating of Europeans coming from Europe who were to undermine the emancipation of the blacks, who were to be emancipated, but now only opportunity for them to use their skill was back where they had already been. And the so-called negotiation between them and those who ran the plantation after the fact, they still got cheated, and it ended up being still slavery again, what you call the nadir, right? This is called the what they call that, the Reconstruction era, where you're reconstructing everything now, right? And so the reason for that main distinction and creating the union and the distinction, because by being white and having this legally label of being white, it gave you the status for fitness for self-government. Okay? Fitness for government means that you have the capacity of mind to be able to self-govern thyself. Okay? Now, when you look at, if any of you got dictionaries, I know a lot of you go to Google, right? So, but if you went and you had a dictionary and you went to look up in your dictionary and look up the word white man's burden, okay? And for you others who don't have one, I'm going to actually post it for you so you can see it. See if I can find it. Okay. And the white man burden says this: the alleged duty of the white race to care for and educate ignorant or uncivilized peoples, especially subject peoples of other races. I'm going to say that again. White man's burden, the alleged duty of the white race to care for and educate ignorant or uncivilized people, especially subject peoples of other races. Now, so just imagine you get a distinction legally to call yourself white, takes you out of the paradigm of this white man's burden and puts you into a privileged status. This is where white privilege originates from. So a lot of people of today, of the descendants of those, and then they hear people like myself and others who talk about the plight of what had took place in history, and then we talk about this and you say that we make up these things or we're still stuck on these things. No, the simple fact of the thing is that these things are prevalent, they are real, and these are issues you will not deal with. You want to bury something and act as if it doesn't exist and that it has no transgression upon what our society is today. So you want to label us as the thorn in your side in society, in American society, and the useless eaters, when it is a creation of your own ancestry and your continuous of facilitating that. I'm going to say that again. The white privilege originated through the times of 1840 to 1863. And through this distinction that was granted legally to you, it gave you privilege. With that privilege, based on the status that you were and those that were at that time with, because you were poor white who did not have any economical stability. And you were no higher than the ones that you were working side by side with. But the only distinction that they gave you is because of your white skin. And with that white skin, you became out of the auspice of the system that was going to oppress those that were not white. And this is what you've been continuing, and you've been upholding it. And based on what I'm about to tell you here, I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. This ain't made up. This is what you continue to keep doing. This is why you're killing our people, because it is something that you have to, through your oath and your loyalty, when you originally came here, you try to uphold something based to keep your status, to show your loyalty, to show that you are fitness for the self-government. Now, when you look at the other people, they were not fit for self-government. Going back to what Whiteman Burden said, because you have to educate them. They're uncivilized people. These are people who are downtrodden just because they're not white like you. So you classify the people in that realm of Africans, Native Americans, Latinos, Asian descents. Okay? So anyone who was from Europe at this particular time, just before 1840, had privilege, regardless of if you was indentured servant or not. Then the influx of 1840, when 1847 happened in Ireland, which they called the Black 47, they brought 234,968 people, the immigrants that came on the shores in 1847. Okay? Because accordingly there was a great famine there, right? And a quarter of that population came to the shores of the United States. Okay? And so so what you have now is this influx of Europeans, and they were going to be able to come here with a status automatically as if they're white. Now, those people, or those what they call nativist whites, who were the ones who were so-called natural born here, they were looking at the fact that when white folks look at each other, all right, here's an inside secret that white folks don't tell you. With some black folks, not all black folks, when black folks see white folks, they just under the auspice or umbrella of they're white. White folks look at white folks, they say, what is your nation of origin and your ethnicity and nation of origin, because that tells them biologically who you really are. We'll say that again. White folks look at each other through nationality to find out the biological makeup of the individual, or the national origin of the individual, of ancestry will tell them the biological makeup of them. Some black folks look at white folks and they just say white folks is white folks. And I'm going to break this down to you and show you that this is a distinction in that. Now, these Irish that were coming here, before they came to the United States, in Ireland, they didn't even have any ideology of whiteness. There was no reason for that, because they knew who they were and who they derived from. But in this country, they had to try to come up with a distinction, right? So when you look at the historical aspect of here in America, you got the Paddy and the Yankee. Okay? And when these two were emerging and started to grow in numbers, this became a kind of a question in the mind of white people. We got to start figuring out who is being a white citizen of the Republican. Okay? And through this, they came up with a new way that they called it a probationary white person, and who had to overcome his certain biological and cultural defects that impedes his ability to be a white American citizen. I'm going to say that again. This a probationary white person, he had to overcome his certain biological and cultural defect. Biological? Think about that. Somebody saying there's something in you, in your biology, that you got a defect in you. And that's kind of prohibiting you from being fully white. But what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to learn or find a way to upgrade. Huh? Upgrade. Meaning you need a pure blood in this so-called ideology that we have created if you want to kind of wash out that biological aspect of you. You feel what I'm saying? And so because a lot of them were stigmatized like that, they had to stay within their own nation of peoples. And so they became, later, as we'll find out, they were the niggas of white folks. And see, these niggas of white folks that they talking about, they were talking about the most degenerate races of the olden days of Europe. And when they talked about that, they called them the human flotsams of the ages. The Irish crossbred German and French and Italians, they were all from doubtful stock. Meaning, niggas have crossed this bloodline if you go in history. Say that again. They were talking about, when you look at the biological part, when they're talking about they had to overcome certain biological aspects that was going to impede on their ability to be considered a full white American citizen. As I told you, when white people look at white people, they go according to their ethnicity, origin of nation, to know their biological makeup. And they knew that there was some crossbreeding through history. Irish, German, French, Italians are more of a doubtful stock, meaning that if you trace that lineage, a nigga gonna fall out the tree. Tell him, Paul. Now, this is what they were worried about when they called the melting pot. That these so-called degenerate races of whites, of European, were going to come in and somehow taint the so-called ideological white citizen. This is your Englishman. He is considered to be your highest, which is your Anglo-Saxon. But I'm going to show you this psychosexual, maladapted sick mug in his thinking, because he's trying to tell you that he's trying to make a distinction by saying that they're white. The only assumption that me as a whiteologist looking at it, and when I trace it back and when I look at it, I have to say there's something that he is stating that he is proud of that the others cannot say. And we're going to have to wait to get to that part. Now, the Irish, more than any other group of Europeans, became the object of these new racial investigations. When they were starting to look deeply into the biological makeup, they said it was the Irish that had more black closest in his lineage than the others that do have it, but they're a little bit more distinct or distant. Okay? When they start talking about this quadroon, third, fourth grandparent, a way that keeps you considered in this ideology, and for some of y'all have probably never heard this before, right? You ain't never heard this before. But this is how they thinking. See, we didn't write this stuff, so you can't say I'm black and I made this stuff up. This is your own writings. Y'all wrote this stuff. I didn't write it. My people didn't write this. They ain't studying you. So it goes on to says that the Irish were frequently referred to as niggers turned out inside out. An inside out nigger is what an Irish person is called. And they said, and blacks were called smoke Irish. Why are they calling blacks smoke Irish? Because the foundation basis of an Irish is a black man. Say that again. The foundation to the Irish is black man. Just like your Italian, just like your Russian, just like your German. Huh? So how is it that the Anglo-Saxon is trying to put himself in a different category when he himself supposedly, now let's put it to you like this. Before it was German, did you know all that land from Germany to Poland? I think it's, let's see, what is it? Germany, Poland, I think it's Czechoslovakian, Belarus, Lithuania, Latvia. You know, that was all called slave at one time. That was a landmass called slave. See, white people tell you, oh, we were slaves at one time, but they're talking about an earlier part in history. They're talking about a more closer to modern time in history. I'm taking you back where you can't even get the map to see when it said slave. Huh? Obviously, I'm saying it because why? I've seen it. It's all in my mind. You can't take it. I know who you are. So, accordingly, this Anglo-Saxon is trying to tell you that when they talk about grafting, and when you got down to this original white, he said he is systemic of this original white, and he's the one as a clan who knows his origin compared to the rest of them through history where they have crossbred or had been taken, especially when you talk about your Italians, your Irish, right? They know blacks in that blood. You feel what I'm saying? And so, why are you saying this, Mr. Blows Your Mind? Why are you talking about this? It's because you got to look at the fact that these mugs took an oath of allegiance to continue their probationary status when their ancestors originally came back in the 1840s and 1860s. And that oath to classify them as whites, and so that they can continue to have their allegiance and their status, they have to prove to the upper echelon of white folks that they're still continuing their oath when they do this kind of shit to our people. You feel what I'm saying? And when you look at these so-called institutions, and you look at who are the foundation bases and who are predominantly in there, these names that our nations that I spoke of are the ones who permeated the most. So they have the most disdain towards us because of the status that they lost, and they attribute it to the fact when they see you, it reminds them of their history, and they hate that. And so it's like saying black on black hate crime. Well, that's what it is too. They just looking white. You understand what I'm saying? They're taking out their aggression and their hatred, hiding through their profession because of what happened in history. They were poor Europeans with privilege of whiteness. In order for them to maintain their loyalty and their allegiance, when they had the draft riots of 1863, you know who they was fighting and killing? Black folks. Where was it at? New York. Ironic, right? Ironic. Well, this is Mr. Blows Your Mind coming with a little quick thought history for your mind. I ain't telling you what I heard. I'm telling you what I know.
Funny ass shit. Show, I love what you do, man, but you make me feel so guilty. Must everything be race? I said, yes, everything. Then you must think I'm the devil. I said, no. What you'll do to the real one gets here. I don't know what to say. I can't help white folks. It's America, freedom of speech. Let me do what I want to do. Y'all have made fun of everybody that ain't felt shit. It's the truth. Yeah, y'all know you're clapping, house niggas ain't clapping scared, but listen. This is real, and I mean this from my heart. I've been taught by white folks. I ain't been on Venus. I'm come from here. I'm reacting to this shit. I ain't sugarcoating shit, because white folks didn't sugarcoat shit to me. White folks didn't give a goddamn. When they didn't want me at their schools, they could have sugarcoated. Well, Paul, perhaps next year we're overcrowded, now we can work some. They didn't say, no, nigga, you can't go to the school because you are nappy-head, wide-nosed nigga. We don't want niggas here. They didn't sugarcoat shit. I got over it, so white folks, you get over me. I lived through the shit, you'll live through it. Because they get mad. It ain't me. This shit was here when I came here. And it'll be here when I'm going to drop dead right now. Racism's are here. It's here forever. It's in the blood.